The next days were a nightmare for Robb. Both Sansa and Arya were furious, and their dire wolves had little compunction in making this known to Grey Wind, who in turn made Robb's life miserable with constant whimpers and pawing. His food was burned, and the edible parts were tasteless. His sheets were still damp on the bed. There was a miraculous shortage of firewood in only his room. The pranks mostly had Arya's vindictive edge to them, but Robb suspected that Sansa was assisting her. There was no way Arya managed to get the sheets to that perfect place between wet and dry that they didn't drip without someone's help. "I'm not quite sure who has the crown," he grumbled to Jon on the way to another bloody council from another breakfast filled with freezing looks and contemptuous flicks of hair. "I should just put one on their heads. Gods know they'd managed to harangue Tywin Lannister to surrender easily enough." "I think Sansa would kill you then," Jon replied, lips twitching, and Robb choked on laughter and burnt bread. And then Sansa told him that she would need the use of the ravens for a full week, all of them, she had said, and the look in her eyes told him not to ask. After that, though Arya was still angry, Sansa didn't appear half as much. Ravens arrived from the Carhold, from Torrhen Square, from White Harbor. Each one left her smiling and brighter faced than before. "She's inviting half the bloody North to Last Hearth," Robb said, looking such a strange mixture of defeated and bewilderedly intrigued that Jon couldn't help but laugh. "Surely not that many," he said. Robb shook his head and stabbed a finger at the paper. "The Karstarks are sending their only daughter. 2 others from the Manderleys, 3 from the Mormonts, and another from the Tallhearts. More women from the lesser houses than I can count. I'm not japing when I say half the bloody North." Jon shrugged helplessly. "Is it supposed to be some sort of revenge? For sending her to the Umbers?" Robb snorted. "I've no clue. And you know what? I do not have space in my head to look at this, to care about this. Tell Sansa that she can invite the rest of the North if she wants. Try to fit all of them into that keeps tiny rooms for as long as needed, and that I don't care." So dramatic, thought Jon. It was what the Starks were, all of them, but Sansa and Robb more than anyone. Red-haired, blue-eyed fools who wept and wailed loud as 100 widows. Silence did not slumber in their bones, and Jon loved every inch of them. "I," was all he said though. "I'll tell her." The night before Robb and Sansa left Winterfell, they announced Jon's true parentage. Whispers filled the halls. Jon focused on not flinching. When he looked up, Arya had snuck close enough to brush his left side. Bran and Rickon bracketed his other. Robb leaned forward and passed him a flag and a veil. Sansa didn't smile, but her eyes were soft and bright. Jon felt a smile lighten his brow, and then he dug into the meal with gusto. "Why are you here?" Robb asked, confused. Jon grimaced. "I told Sansa what you said. She told me that if I wanted to communicate orders through you so badly, I should go with you to the south." "She needs you," Robb exclaimed. "You're the one fighting battles," he replied archly. Robb wanted to scream. The only thing stopping him from actually doing so was the 2 guards stationed at the tent's entrance, who'd likely recognized their young king's frustrated, shrill rage. Instead, he breathed deep and clawed some measure of rationality into his tone. "Jon," he said as reasonably as he could, "go back to Sansa." "Robb," Jon said in the same tone, "I'm staying here." "Damn it, I'm the twos. If you say you're the king, I'll take that bloody crown and punch you in the face," Jon said, and there was still no anger in his tone. Damn the man. Robb sighed and turned back, hands gripping the back of the chair until his knuckles were white. "Fine," he snapped, finally, petulantly, and wished his entire family didn't know precisely how to make him feel like a green boy again. Sansa rode north with Arya beside her. The small folk whispered of the red-haired princess who rode a dire wolf silver as weirwood bark and with eyes as gold as Lannister hair. They whispered of the black-haired princess who belted a sword narrow and gleaming at her waist. They whispered of the red-curled prince who was as wild as he was cheerful. Women from all the different noble houses descended on Last Hearth. Half arrived before Sansa did, and so when the snow crunched under her feet, 100 eyes were watching her carefully, curiously. In another lifetime, Sansa had barely known the women of the North. She'd had no friends to remember, no people who cared or even spared her a thought when she disappeared. "I am a princess," she thought now. "You will know me. All of you will know who I am, who the Starks are. And you will tell your fathers and brothers and husbands that we are stronger than you can imagine." "Thank you for coming," she said graciously. "There's almost 50 storage rooms under the castle, Princess," said Morzumber. "We've the largest amount of steel in all the North." "That sounds lovely," Alice Karstark said acidly. "And what do you do when it snows?" "I," murmured Willa Manderly. "Steel cannot feed women and children." Adara Tallheart lifted one eyebrow elegantly. "Do you say it can feed men, my lady?" "Of course," Mira Reed said. "Haven't you heard of the troubles the kitchens have, trying to make sure steel doesn't cut their throats from the inside?" Sansa would have laughed if Mors wasn't starting to turn puce. There was something to be said, she decided, right then and there, for the rage girls could induce in men. It was a mean, low thought, but a vicious sort of gladness, nonetheless. "My lord," she said instead of a smile, "perhaps you could show us to our rooms." Sansa sent ravens. Her letters weren't sharp any longer, and they were more than a few curt sentences, too. Perhaps, Jon thought, she'd forgiven both of them. He could remember the way her cheeks had flushed, the outrage, and then the cold disdain when she heard his jape. Jon had wanted her to laugh, but Sansa had only turned away, spots of red high in her pale face, and told him, "If you like giving messages so much, you'd be better served in an actual war camp." For a full day, he'd agonized over it. And then she'd come to his rooms that night, a shadow with a wolf dogging her footsteps, and press so close to him that one couldn't pass a single finger between them. "Keep Robb safe," she'd begged him, and Jon had wanted to tell her, "I am sworn to you, Sansa." But Sansa never begged. She never lowered herself to it. And here she was, so worried for her brother that she was begging, and it made something deep and cold in Jon's belly curdle. "Of course," he said instead, carting rough fingers through her hair. "Of course, darling sweet thing. I'll stand beside him. Don't you worry." And so Jon wasn't beside Sansa, and he had to be content with ravens winging forth from the north. She told them of Alice Karstark's pride, of Willa Manderly's pale green hair, of Lyra and Jarell Mormontsee's with swords, of Mira Reed's cheerful disposition and black humor, of Adira Tallheart's grace, of Arya's budding friendship with Lyanna Mormont. Rickon enjoyed the cold air, she said, and Shaggy Dog had taken to the Wolfswood with enthusiasm. Of herself she wrote little, but that which she did spoke of a wry contentment that Jon had never heard before. Perhaps it was doing Sansa well to spend time with women of similar standing and age. When she spoke of her other life, it seemed that she'd never truly had something like it. The men teased him for his hoarding of her letters mercilessly. Jon snapped and snarled and set ghost on the worst of them, but he did not stop reading over her words before he fell asleep, every night like clockwork. They ran short on meat, and so Morzumber and his brother decided to ride into the Wolfswood to hunt. The men seemed so excited to follow them, and every time Sansa passed by the Great Hall, the trip seemed to grow in length. Sansa had known that the men found it chafing, being locked up in a place with only 8 girls of noble status in their households, but she hadn't known their boredom was this bad. By the time they'd fully decided, their trip was to be a fortnight long and offer meat enough to last them a year. Alice rolled her eyes. Adara didn't look up from her sewing, but her lips quirked. Willa and Winifred didn't appear the slightest bit interested in the whole venture. "Of course," Sansa said serenely. "We shall miss you, my lord, and shall pray for your safety." They left the next morning with banners pulling taut against the wind. Stannis died. So did Renly, and the singers were given many songs that day. The beautiful third son, clad in armor, a gleaming silver, the sour second one, given over to madness and prophecy. Their battle over right and might and inheritance and blood, the fall of steel. The truth of that day was something less romantic. Renly laid siege to Dragonstone months previously. On the edge of starvation for the second time in his life, Stannis asked for a parley. The terms he offered were to spare Renly's death, were he to bend the knee, and Renly refused. Stannis returned to Dragonstone and the siege continued. The next morning, Stannis led a last charge to break the back of Renly's army, and during the battle, a shadow, black and creeping and ugly, struck Renly from the back. Stannis must have thought to use the confusion as his ally. But the Knight of Flowers rallied the men with a loud cry and drove back Stannis' men, his tired, half-starved men, with ease. Lady Brienne of Tarth struck Stannis' head from his shoulders. The Tyrells fled back to Highgarden with Margaery and Loras, but not before rebuilding the Sept, exiling all the followers of the Lord of Light that would not convert back to the faith of the Seven, and killing the priestess Melisandre, who claimed responsibility for the shadow that killed Renly. Princess Shireen, the last of the true-born Baratheons, was placed under the strict supervision of certain Storm Lords and taken to Storm's End. Songs told of a knight's valor, of a brother's rage, of a woman's seduction. But here's the truth, plain and ugly: that terrible day there was only death. Sansa took a long, leisurely walk through the courtyard, lady beside her. Lyra and Jarell Mormont were sparring only a few yards away, and several other women were walking as well. With the keep empty of men, more women than ever seemed to enjoy the sunlight on their faces. A place of peace, she thought. A place where we need not fear. 'Tis a blessing, for however long it lasts. And as soon as she thought it, Riskan burst out from a shadow, riding a shaggy dog and whooping. Women scattered before him, shrieking, and Sansa felt a laugh bubble through her chest. It took her a full hour to get him off Shaggy Dog. It took Lady snarling him into submission, in point of fact, and though he pouted when she made him wash his hands, he was soon giggling madly as Sansa, in an attempt to get him to eat his dinner, soon had more food on her skirts than in his mouth. Finally taking pity on Sansa's increasingly despairing expression, Adara and Alice descended on him and sent her to clean up. Sansa had just changed into a new gown and was walking through the courtyard again, this time in an attempt to clear her head, when a rhythmic sound came from the gates, and Sansa turned to look. Arya burst into the courtyard, clinging to Nymeria's back, and slipped off before the direwolf had stopped. Lyra and Jarell, still sparring, stopped and drifted over, curiously. "Lannisters," gasped Arya. Her cheeks were red and chapped with wind. Sansa frowned. Arya had gone for rides into the plains surrounding the keep every morning, and Sansa had never said a word against it. Arya could keep herself safe, after all. But now, Lannisters? Arya nodded frantically. More than 100, marching from the river. More than 100. Not by much! She dug her hands into her breeches and doubled over, panting, before getting up slowly. They're wearing Northwear. I'd not have thought them out of place if I hadn't seen the Kingslayer. You're sure, Arya? Sansa asked sharply. Yes, she snapped. I know what I saw. I'm sure of it. There's a Lannister force of about 100 men riding to this bloody keep, and if we don't do anything, we'll die where we stand. Jarell started forward. How far are they, Princess? A few hours. They'll be here before sundown, at the latest. Drop the titles, Sansa said flatly. Arya and Jarell looked at her, startled. She only looked up, judging the position of the sun. We've more important things to do than identify which title we have, and time is of the essence. An afternoon, at the most, if they were lucky. Gods, what a time to have only women and children here. Get me Alice, Willa, Winifred, Adara, Mira, and have them assemble in the solar. And you, Jarell, and Lyra. Sansa turned to Arya. Have some women go and gather herbs and berries and all the things they can from the forest nearby, she told her. Take Lady and Nymeria with you, and bring them back before sundown, do you hear? Yes, Arya replied, and turned to walk away. There, she hesitated for a brief moment. Sansa. I know, Sansa said, and she did. Neither of them would ever dream of telling Robb or Jon, but they'd been terrified when the Lannisters rode north. There was no news, not for almost a full week, and Father had locked the gates and told them that if the bone horn set outside the keep was to blow, they had to run and hide. Every night, Sansa had dragged Arya into her rooms and they'd lain together, just as angry as they were frightened. But there, they'd had Father beside them. They'd had Roderick Castle and his trained guards. They'd had Robb. Now they had themselves and not a single other person who could save them. We will have to be enough, Sansa thought, and stepped forward to press a cold palm to Arya's for just a heartbeat. Be safe, she whispered, and then walked back into the keep. In Lord Umber's solar, Sansa entered into a storm of shouting. Adara had lost all her reserve, it seemed, for she was gesturing so wildly that everyone was giving her a meter berth. Willa shouted back, shoving at her sister when Winifred snapped something. Alice whirled on Willa and might very well have gone after her with her bare hands had Sansa not brought the flat of her palms down on the table. The crack reverberated through the room, silencing it. A force of 100 Lannisters rides to Last Hearth, Sansa said into the silence. We have no men and over 500 women and children to protect. If we fight amongst ourselves, how can we hope to survive? Slowly, awkwardly, the women gathered around the table. Sansa ignored their hesitance. There was no time for patience, not now. We must first send word, Willa said finally. To our fathers, or to Winterfell, at the least. I'll send a raven within the hour, Sansa agreed. The Lannisters will shoot it down. Lyra shifted uneasily. It's what any battle commander would do. You don't want your enemies sending out calls for aid. We'll try, of course, but we can't trust that it'll reach. Adara nodded. And what of the men? We have to tell them what's going on as well. Aye, they can try to break the Lannisters against these walls. It's not going to work. They're unarmed, and have you seen the geography? The Lannisters can hold the entire valley with only 50 men. Surprise can't answer for the rest of the disadvantages. So what, we sit here and starve while the Lannisters parade outside? We aren't even sure they are Lannisters. We do both at the same time, Sansa announced, and the others fell silent. She was a princess, and everyone there knew it. Sansa had to lead. Lyra, Jarell, amongst the two of you, who's the better rider? They looked at each other, measuring. I am, Lyra said finally. And who's the better at wielding a sword? I am, Lyra repeated. Sansa's head jerked in a decisive nod. Then you'll ride out within the hour to the Wolfswood, find the men, and lead them south to Winterfell. When they all protested, a rising tide of sound against leaving themselves helpless, Sansa held up a hand. Alice is correct. Surprise cannot answer for everything else our men will face. If they attack the Lannisters, at best, they will be taken as hostages. At worst, they will die. No one answered that. Finally, Willa looked up, meeting Sansa's eyes steadily. It's a good idea, she said. But don't lead those men only to Winterfell, Lyra. Tell them to go to each of the major houses and spread the word. Slowly, Alice nodded. If the Lannisters take the castle, they'll hold the entire north by the throat. All the women of the high houses will control us. They'll control the north. Another way for the north to fall. Gods, I did this. They won't, Sansa heard herself say. as if from a great distance. The others looked at her, startled, and she pushed her chair back. She rose to her feet. We will hold last hearth, until we breathe our last. This is the North, not any gold-veined Lannister keep. We are the daughters of each of the noble houses of the North, and we will not kneel to an honorless kingslayer quietly. She breathed in sharply and averted her face, searching for some measure of control. Finally, she nodded to Lyra. Go, she ordered. Get ready. We'll meet you at the gates. Lyra left, and then Mira asked dryly, And what should we do, Princess Sansa? Drop the title, Sansa said. We have to work together, or we won't be able to do anything. Right now, it is the 6 of you and Arya who are my council of war. So what do you think you should do? Well, we could put some people in charge of different things, Alice said. Like food, water, clothes. Different women for different things. Like who? Alina Glenmore has a good head on her shoulders, Jarrell commented. Idara folded her hands neatly on the table. The Forrester girls should be good at managing the clothes. And Bethany Blackwood's young, but her father's taught her to maintain horses fairly well. Gwyn Whitehill? Alice asked. She could help Alina. Sansa felt a smile twitch her lips. Idara and Alice, you'll set it up then? Everything but food, I think. You'll be the go-betweens for the rest of the women and us, if that's all right with you. We shall do our best, Idara murmured. And the rest of you, Sansa said, sweeping a hand between them, just keep the peace. Keep the women calm, tell them we'll survive. Make sure they don't panic. Good advice, Jarrell said sardonically. We are children fighting a war, but we've 500 women here, dependent on our bravery. We cannot afford mistakes. Come, she said calmly. We must gather in the courtyard. Stay alive, Sansa told Lyra quietly. Stay safe, and stay alive. Keep your head down and your chin up and whisper the truth as loudly as you dare. But live, Lyra, please, before everything else. I would not wish the pain of a sister's death on anyone. You're a good leader, Lyra replied and swung onto the horse. You'll keep them safe. I'm glad Jory and Lyanna have you here to protect them. Now you keep them safe, you hear? Mother'll kill me if she finds out anything happened to them. One elder sister to another, Sansa said, and clasped Lyra's hands in her own, a promise as steady as she could make it. I'll do my best. Aye, you will. And I don't think anyone can stop you when you do your best, can they? She winked, and with that last, confusing comment, Lyra left. Jaime Lannister's men came into view almost before Arya had finished leading the women back. It was Lyanna Mormont who chivied the last of them, and despite the bleakness of the situation, Sansa felt amused at the cowed looks of women likely thrice the girl's age. Close the gates, she ordered, and it was done quickly. Sansa waited grimly as they rode closer. The bulk of the men stopped and circled a point perhaps a half-mile from the walls. A pale-haired youth rode forward after some uncertain milling and paused at the gates. We've come to ask for shelter, he called up to her. Have you? Sansa asked back. Tell me, since when did Jaime Lannister become a northerner? The boy paused, taken aback, and Sansa pressed onwards. Tell the Kingslayer that I wish to speak to him. Mera made an abortive sound, but she ignored her. And tell him that I will only leave these walls when he has the guts to fly Lannister banners. I refuse to walk into an enemy camp painted with Stark direwolves. The boy turned and left. An hour later, the white banners were taken down and red ones flew. Sansa took it as a sign of acceptance of her terms, and readied herself to leave. I'm coming, Arya said. Sansa shook her head. If they don't honor the peace terms, you'll have to hold the castle. I'm not delivering both Stark princesses to the Kingslayer on a silver platter. Just yourself, said Mira. And Alice, agreed Sansa. We'll go, and we'll come back. But you'll hold this castle no matter what happens, do you understand? No matter what happens to me, or to Alice. You'll come back, Arya snapped, or I'll take your head myself. Sansa smiled thinly and embraced her. Stay safe, she whispered, and then pulled herself onto the horse. An afterthought, she added, and keep Rickon safe too, Arya. Of course, Arya said. And you too. Keep safe. Of course, Sansa echoed, and she and Alice left. Jaime watched two specks steadily get bigger. Upon closer inspection, the specks were two women, and one had that damn tele hair. That had to be Sansa Stark, then purportedly a princess, and a gracious one at that, according to the small folk. According to Cersei, she was a fool and a pawn that had as much air in her brain as color in her hair. Beside her, he frowned, and then looked to his left, a silent question hanging in the air. Alice Karstark, said Ramsay Snow, who had provided uniforms that gave them some measure of protection and guided them to the keep that would give them unfettered control of the north. You know her well? Well enough, Ramsay said nonchalantly. The two rode up smoothly. Alice Karstark looked at him, and then her eyes fell on Ramsay, and she went white. Traitor, she snarled, and might very well have leapt forwards had Sansa not brought her horse between them. I offered you ale, she continued, speaking over Sansa's slowly panicking horse. I welcomed you into my home, you bastard. Jaime felt his hands tighten on the pommel of his sword. And then Sansa said something, low and hard, and the Karstark girl cut herself off. Jaime relaxed a fraction, letting go of his white-knuckled hold on his sword, but he still felt uneasy. Something was frightening in the girl's rage, something that was as wild and savage as any lion. But if he'd thought that Sansa Stark was calm, he realized quickly enough that she wasn't. Her hands were tight on the reins, and the look on her face was just as cold as her bannerwoman's. So this is what Boltons are, she said. Not just uncivilized bastards. Not just bloodthirsty savages. Traitors. Jaime blinked, momentarily disconcerted. Where was this venom coming from? Cersei tended to exaggerate, no doubt, but he'd also seen Sansa in King's Landing. The girl who'd almost fainted at speaking to Tommen was decidedly more vicious when faced with true danger in the form of an army. I thought you came to parley, he interjected before Ramsay could speak and make things worse. At that, both girls turned to look at him. For a moment, he worried that it would descend into violence. Had they been men, he'd surely have unsheathed his sword by now. But then Sansa seemed to regain some measure of control over herself, and though her face remained cold, her tone was slightly warmer when she said our apologies. Accepted, Jaime said. With anyone else, he'd make a quick jape, but there was something sharp and dangerous in the air, and he didn't like the feeling. Why feel uneasy when he held all the cards? He only nodded. Name your terms of surrender. Sansa straightened and tossed her red hair back. Leave, she said. Leave, now, and you will survive. Jaime choked. Whatever else he'd expected, he hadn't thought she'd try to bluff her way through. He felt grudging respect for her guts. If nothing else, she had the bravery to attempt it, even if she didn't have any sort of brains to match. We've 112 men, he told her incredulously. What, you think I'll just leave for no reason when you've 10 men in that keep? 10, if you're lucky. How could you have any way of knowing that? Alice asked. We've passed through 5 towns, Jaime replied slowly, now truly worried for their intelligence. The people talked about the cheerful men from last hearth, almost 200, leaving on a hunting trip. Lord Bolton told us how many men to expect. The rest was simple arithmetic. Sansa inhaled sharply and turned to Ramsay. What did they offer you? She asked abruptly. Gold? Titles? Tell me, what did the Lannisters offer that we couldn't give? Winterfell, Ramsay replied. We hold you and your siblings, my lady, and we hold the north. It wasn't like your brother's foolish attempt to bring vengeance would achieve anything anyway. 'Tis death and blood that will fall on him, nothing more. But, yes, when he brought you here, my father took it as a sign from the gods. Why else make it so easy to take control? Why else would the keep be emptied of men when we arrived? Do not think the gods favor you, Sansa said icily. Their opinion on treason is well documented. You are forsworn bastard soldiers, all of you here, and you will go to the deepest of the 7 hells if the gods are just. She breathed deep and then nodded as if making up her mind. Our terms still hold. If you leave now, no northern lord will stop you from marching down past the neck. Aye, said Alice, and then to Ramsay, we won't even fight for your head. They're still girls. What do they know of negotiation? I don't know what parleys you've been to, Jaime said flatly, but this isn't how they work. You don't start with unconditional surrender. See, I'll even offer you a counter. Open the gates, let us in, and we won't touch a single hair on any of your pretty heads. Take it. It's a better offer than any you'd get from anyone else. I know what a parley is, Sansa said, and didn't even look insulted. Joffrey would have, Jaime thought suddenly, out of nowhere. This isn't a parley, Kingslayer. I said that I wished to speak to you, and I have said what I wish to. If you leave, we won't hunt you down. You should ask some other treasonous bannermen what happened to the last man who doubted a Stark's word. I'm sorry to say Ramsay Snow wasn't there. If you think I should heed you, I'd strongly suggest you listen to me. What in the 7 hells? I can't save them from their own stupidity. My terms will stand until sunrise, Jaime replied finally. If anyone else in that keep has more brains than you, Lady Sansa. Princess? She corrected and smiled. So coldly was surprised her face didn't crack from it. My purpose is served then. Good day, Kingslayer. The morning shall bring our answer, won't it? She and Alice started to wheel their horses around when Ramsay said, Capture them. Jaime didn't answer. But then Sansa turned around, and he recoiled at the disdain in her eyes. At the disdain, yes, but also that there was no fear in them. Do it, she said, and it sounded like a dare. Do it, Kingslayer. Take me, and take my banner woman, and do with us what you will. The North will remember what you did, and every last house will rise against you in response. My sister will bar the gates and starve to death before she so much as allows a single one of you through. My brother will raise everything you've ever known and loved, and all you'll have is a frozen army outside a frozen keep in the middle of nowhere, with not a single hostage to your name. Do it. Jaime swallowed through a dry throat and wondered if this was what Cersei would have looked like had she been allowed on a battlefield. Let them leave, he ordered.